My name is Joanna Parker. I'm 44 years old. I own an HVAC business in Austin, Texas, and I've spent the last 2 decades elbow deep in air ducts, raising 2 kids, and being underestimated by every polished, wine-sipping stepmother my ex-husband ever brought around. And this is the story of how I turned my daughter's betrayal into a masterclass in respect, with a wrench in one hand and every wedding contract in the other. Let me ask you this. If you paid for a wedding, I mean every dime of it, the venue, the photographer, the 5-layer organic cake with edible orchids, and then were told you weren't invited, what would you do? Would you suck it up and cry into a napkin on the big day? Or would you do what I did quietly, legally, and deliciously, and remind them who made that wedding even possible in the first place? Because in this story, I'm not just the mother of the bride. I'm the woman who funded the fairy tale and rewrote the ending. Before I dive in, if you're the kind of person who believes in fairness, dignity, and not letting people walk all over you, then hit that like, subscribe, and comment below what would you do if your child banned you from their own wedding. Trust me, you're going to want to stay to the end. I run a business called Cool Mama Climate Services. Yeah. Laugh all you want, but I have 8 technicians, 3 vans, and a backlog of customers who trust me more than they trust their doctors. Because when it's 112 degrees in July and your AC dies, you don't call the guy in a suit, you call me. I built this business from the ground up after my divorce from Mark, my ex-husband, who once told me, and I quote, "You're too rough around the edges to be a real partner at my events." This was after I supported him through his MBA, fixed his mother's heater for free, and raised our daughter Rachel and son Nathan practically solo while he pursued better opportunities, one of which apparently included Judith, a real estate PR executive who treats blue-collar folks like they track dirt on her white carpet just by existing. Mark left when Rachel was 12 and Nathan was just 6. Judith moved in within 6 months, complete with teeth-whitening trays, Pilates routines, and a way of saying, oh, she's their real mother that made you feel like a janitor at a black-tie gala. But I kept the kids, kept the bills paid, learned to braid hair from YouTube, fixed Rachel's science fair volcano with duct tape and hope, sat in ER rooms when Nathan broke his wrist falling off a tree he swore wasn't too high. I didn't date. I didn't vacation. I poured everything time, sweat, savings into making sure my kids never felt like their lives were less whole because mom wore steel-toed boots and worked on rooftops. Now Rachel, she always had ambition, even as a teen. She loved things elegant. She'd walk around with magazines, circling dresses, tablescapes, wedding venues she'd probably seen on Pinterest. I encouraged it. Hell, I promised her one day I would make her dream wedding happen. And when she got into UC Santa Barbara on a PR scholarship, I cheered louder than anyone. She left for California and came back with a refined accent, a fiancé named Jared, and a wardrobe that screamed, I have opinions about wine. I didn't mind. Jared seemed polite enough, worked in pharmaceutical sales, good handshake, quick with Mrs. Parker, though I always told him to call me Joe. But his parents, his parents. Richard and Denise Langford, corporate law royalty from Houston, the kind of people who wear blazers to brunch and make you feel like you've spilled something by breathing. They asked me once at dinner what I did. I said, I keep people from dying of heat stroke in July. They smiled like I told them I clean septic tanks. Still, I kept my word. When Rachel and Jared started planning the wedding and realized their combined student loans could barely cover the save the date cards, guess who stepped in? Me. I offered to pay for the venue, the catering, the photographer, even the bridal suite at Lakeview Vista, a resort so swanky it made my credit card whimper just driving past it. It wasn't easy. I pulled money from my retirement fund, postponed a new van purchase for my tech team, delayed dental work. But when Rachel cried and hugged me, whispering thank you, Mom, I could never do this without you. I felt like maybe, just maybe, my blue-collar grit was finally being seen. That feeling didn't last long. 2 weeks later, while I was checking Freon levels on a school's rooftop unit in 97 degrees heat, I got a call. From Rachel. She never calls. She texts, emojis, GIFs, the occasional, "Can I borrow $300, but this time?" Her voice was soft. "Mom, we need to talk about the wedding guest list." "Sure. What's up?" "It's just, Jared's parents think it might be better if you don't come." Silence. "You know, for aesthetics." Aesthetics. As if I was a grease stain on her wedding photos. As if the woman who was paying for this entire fairy tale didn't match the wallpaper. She continued. "Judith's coordinating the visuals. It's going to be all whites, golds, soft lighting, very curated. You understand, right?" "Oh, sweetheart." I understood. They wanted my money, not my presence. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just finished the job, packed my tools, drove home in silence. And that night, while I soaked my calloused hands in Epsom salt and stared at a photo of 8-year-old Rachel holding a World's Best Mom card she made out of glitter and glue, I decided, if I wasn't going to be part of the wedding, then neither was the fantasy they thought they were building. They wanted a wedding without the mother. Let's see what that really looked like. You know what the worst kind of betrayal is? It's not the screaming, cursing, throwing a lamp at the wall type. No, it's the quiet kind. The kind that comes wrapped in politeness, in curated white roses and gold-accented table runners. The kind that wears a smile while it cuts you out. I spent that night pacing my living room, torn between heartbreak and rage, remembering every cold night I stayed up with Rachel when she had the flu. Every open house I showed up to with paint on my arms and sawdust in my hair because I had to go straight from a job site. Judith didn't do any of that. Judith was busy recommending silk napkin folds and Instagram-worthy chandeliers, while I was learning to make cupcakes that didn't collapse because Rachel wanted a unicorn birthday party and I couldn't afford a bakery. And now she's the aesthetic Rachel wants. The mother of the bride. Picture perfect. I went to bed that night not crying, not yelling, but planning. Because I don't break, I build. That's what I've done my whole life. When something fails, I don't panic. I diagnose, I troubleshoot, and I fix. So I asked myself, what's broken here? Not just my heart, not just my relationship with Rachel. What's broken is respect. And what fixes that leverage? At 6:03 a.m. the next morning, I called Rosa, the caterer. We'd done the HVAC for her restaurant 2 years ago, saved her about $12,000 in replacement costs by refurbishing her existing air handler instead of selling her a brand new unit. She cried when she saw the final invoice. Now she answers my calls on the first ring. I explained, calmly, that the wedding was undergoing some adjustments. Less emphasis on certain parental elements. No father-daughter dances or mother of the bride moments. Would it make sense to scale down the champagne toast package? Maybe pivot to a simpler plated dinner instead of a full buffet? Rosa paused, then said, "You're the client. Just tell me what you want." Click, one lever pulled. Then I called Jared and Rachel's wedding photographer, Greg. My brother Paul once bailed him out of a contract dispute with a shady venue using his notary license and some very creative PDF editing. Greg owes my family. So, when I asked if we could adjust the photography timeline, maybe cut out the bridal prep suite shots and parent portraits, he didn't even question it. "Less work for me," he said. Click, lever number 2. But the real power move came that afternoon. See? There's something you learn in business contracts are just promises on paper. They're meaningless without relationships to back them. And every wedding contract was under my name. The florist, my former HVAC intern's sister. The DJ, my neighbor's godson. The venue I did a rush emergency fix for their cooling system last August when their manager was hosting a Chamber of Commerce luncheon. Gave them a discount just for being a local small business. These people don't answer calls from Mark or Judith. They answer mine. I wasn't canceling anything. That would have made me look petty. No. I was doing what every good businesswoman does when the project specs change. I was adjusting the deliverables. And as I made those calls, one by one, I kept things professional, courteous. Hey, just so you're aware, the bride's vision is shifting. They want something smaller, more intimate, less traditional parental involvement. Not one of them questioned me. Not one of them called Rachel. Because in their eyes, I was the project manager, the source of the money, the architect of this entire production. And the one thing you never do in the service industry is piss off the person writing the checks. Later that week, I got a call from Denise Jared's mom, voice honeyed with concern, but cold underneath. Joanna, I understand there's been a bit of confusion. I'm sure Rachel didn't mean to hurt you. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. That's good to hear. Denise, I'd hate to think this was intentional. She gave a short laugh. We just want everything to go smoothly. Judith has such a vision, and Rachel has always loved her style. Ah, there it was. The real reason. Judith wasn't just attending. She was orchestrating. Rachel had handed over her wedding to the woman who married her father. The woman who used to call my son spirited when she really meant too wild. I let Denise talk, let her circle around the topic like a polite vulture, and when she finally, gently asked if I'd be willing to take a step back to avoid any tension, I gave her my warmest Texas drawl. Of course, I'd never want to be somewhere I wasn't wanted. Her relief was almost palpable. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't stepping back. I was stepping up into the control booth. That night, I opened my laptop, reviewed every contract, every invoice, every vendor contact sheet. I created a spreadsheet, cross-referenced schedules, noted dependencies, and then I made one more call to Marcus. Marcus runs the building maintenance for Langford & Price, LLP, Jared's dad's law firm. Guess who installed their entire HVAC control system last year after their previous contractor failed a city inspection? Me. Guess who's the only person certified to handle that particular European system in the state of Texas? Also me. I didn't threaten. I didn't hint. I just asked if Marcus had any concerns about their weekend cooling loads. It's supposed to be 103 on Saturday, I said casually. If you want to schedule preventive maintenance, I've got a window, but it's long work. Might take the whole day. He paused, then said, Yeah, better to be safe. Let's book it. Click. That was the sound of leverage snapping into place like a ratchet. By Friday, the first ripples were reaching Rachel. She texted me, confused. Why is Rosa saying something about a reduced menu? I replied, Oh, I assumed you'd updated everyone, given the new guest list. Just trying to align with your vision. A few minutes later, Greg said you canceled the pre-ceremony shots. Me just adapting. Less parent presence. Fewer photos. That's how these things work. Right. Then came the call. Not Rachel this time. Mark, my ex-husband. First time he'd called me in years. His tone was smug, like he thought he could handle me. Joanna, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is Rachel's big day. Sure is, I replied. And I've done everything I can to make sure it reflects exactly what she wants. Silence. Then, it's not about you. Oh, I know. That's why I'm adjusting my level of involvement. He didn't know what to say, and neither did Rachel, when she finally called the next morning, frantic. Her voice cracked, Mom, what are you doing? And I almost believed she didn't understand. Almost. I could hear the panic, the sudden realization that cutting someone out isn't clean when you're tangled in every thread of the plan. Sweetheart, I said, keeping my tone calm. I'm just aligning my support with your invitation. Another pause. Then, softly. Are you trying to ruin my wedding? No. Rachel, I'm trying to give you the wedding you wanted, just without the parts that apparently didn't fit your vision. And I ended the call, not angrily, but like you hang up on a client who wants champagne service on a beer budget. The thing about leverage, it's not about shouting, it's about control, quiet, subtle, undeniable control. And by the time they realized, I held it the florist, the caterer, the DJ, even the building temperature where Jared's dad worked, I was already moving on to the next step, because weddings run on details, and every detail in this one flowed through me. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Saturday morning, wedding day. I woke before dawn without an alarm. Old habit, back when the kids were little. I'd wake at 5:00 just to make lunches and prep for the chaos. This morning was quieter, but not calmer. I stood at the window in my robe, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise creep up over the rooftops like a slow, burning truth. This was the day my daughter was going to marry a man she loved, and I wasn't invited. Not because I was dangerous or neglectful, but because I didn't look right in the wedding photos. Because my apron had paint stains instead of pearls. And because Judith had somehow sold the narrative that I was the complication, not the woman who walked out on a 6-year-old boy sobbing by the kitchen door. But weddings run on one thing above all else: presence. And today, everyone was going to feel mine. At 9:13 a.m., the first domino dropped. Greg, the photographer, texted Rachel, "Sorry, can't find backup camera. Primary rig might overheat. I'll do my best." It sounded technical, innocuous, but it wasn't. Greg knew exactly how to stage that message. Just enough uncertainty to breed panic. At 10:01, Rosa called Judith. Need final confirmation on guest headcount. Conflicting info about table setups. Also, filet mignon is out of stock. We'll have to pivot to chicken or pasta. Judith, of course, lost it. Chicken. For a lawyer's son's wedding, unthinkable, but Rosa wasn't done. Champagne order was revised by Joanna. Smaller toast, fewer bottles. Sorry for the confusion. Confusion, indeed. And then, as if the universe was in on it, the venue manager Ashley texted Jared. "Florist delayed. Minimal setup in ballroom. Please confirm if we're scaling down." What they didn't know was that the florist wasn't delayed. She'd just been told to prioritize the Sunday event next door, a retirement party for an ex-mayor's wife. I pulled that string Thursday night. Mutual favors, old promises, sealed with years of respect. By noon, I could practically feel the tension radiating off the venue like Texas heat off asphalt. And then came the kill shot. Langford and Price, LLP, Jared's father's prestigious law firm, began heating up literally. Their HVAC system accidentally switched to diagnostic mode at exactly 12:03. Marcus called me in a panic. "Joanna, it's 81 in here and rising. The partners are flipping out." I replied evenly. "I warned you it might be a long day. I'm still on my way. Better cancel those afternoon meetings." I wasn't lying. I was on my way. But not to fix anything. Not yet. Some lessons require a little sweat. Around 1:30 p.m. My phone started buzzing. Rachel, then Judith, then Jared. I let it go to voicemail. Over and over. I sat on the porch with my coffee refilled, phone on silent, and a small, satisfied smile on my lips. Not because I was happy to hurt them. God, no. But because for the first time in years, they were realizing I wasn't just a shadow in the background, I was the damn power source. And when you unplug that, the lights go out. By 2:00 p.m., it was crisis mode. The wedding coordinator called me. Not Judith, not Rachel. Me. "Hi, Ms. Harper. There's been some miscommunication with the vendors. The ceremony decor is minimal. The DJ says his setup is partial, and the catering team seems confused about their timing. Could you clarify?" I took a beat, then said, "Of course. but I was told I wouldn't be attending, just aligning the event with that directive. I wouldn't want to impose. Silence. And then, very softly, would you be willing to come by? That was the turning point. Not just of the day, of the entire dynamic. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't being tolerated. I was being requested, not out of guilt, but out of need. But I didn't rush. I let the moment simmer. Let the tension thicken like humidity before a storm. At 3:12, I finally answered Rachel's call. Her voice was shaking. Mom, please, everything's falling apart. We need you. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply asked. What changed? Her silence was telling. Then she whispered, I didn't know how much of it was you. I didn't understand. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. You didn't want to understand. You wanted Judith's story to feel easier. Another pause. Then, barely audible, I'm sorry. Now, apologies are tricky, especially when they come wrapped in desperation. But something about her tone felt real this time. Not performative, not coached. So I said, all right, I'll come. But things are going to change. You hear me? Yes, she said. Quick and clear. Anything, not anything. I corrected. Everything that should have been. I arrived at 4:02 dressed in a navy pantsuit, simple earrings, no makeup, and work boots. Not to make a statement, but because I'd just come from a service call. Real life doesn't stop for weddings. The venue staff straightened as I walked in. Rosa greeted me like a general returning to command. Joanna, she said, handing me a clipboard. Tell me what to fix. I glanced at the seating chart. Restore original layout. Full toast. Swap the pasta back to steak. And call the florist, tell her Joanna says the Sunday party can wait. Rosa grinned. Thought you'd say that. It took 38 minutes to reset the event. That's the power of reputation. Of people who trust you because you've earned it. And when I finally walked into the bridal suite, Rachel turned. Her makeup was smudged, eyes puffy, veil off. Mom, I nodded once. You ready to do this properly? She nodded back, and we embraced tight, silent, trembling. But the best moment, the real payoff, wasn't emotional. It was operational. At exactly 5:20 p.m., I walked over to Jared's father, Richard, who was dabbing sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. Heard the firm was a little warm today, I said casually. His eyes narrowed. That was you, I smiled. No, Richard. That was physics. But I'm the one who understands it. He opened his mouth, then closed it. We'll talk Monday, he muttered. I look forward to it. As the ceremony began, the vendors hit every mark. Greg's backup camera miraculously worked. Rosa's filet mignon arrived steaming. The flowers bloomed like the Garden of Eden had RSVP'd. And Rachel, my daughter, walked down the aisle on my arm, whispering, "Thank you for not letting me ruin this." I didn't respond. Some moments deserve silence. But as we stood there, just before the vows, I glanced at Judith in the front row, her face unreadable, her lips pursed. She knew, not just what I'd done, but how I'd done it. No shouting, no courtroom drama, just strategy. Quiet, sharp, undeniable strategy. And that, more than revenge, was the victory. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is remind everyone exactly what she's capable of. The reception glimmered under golden chandeliers, a curated scene of celebration, masking the emotional aftershocks still rippling beneath the surface. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, drink in hand, watching guests laugh, toast, and pose for pictures as if nothing had ever gone wrong. As if this day hadn't nearly imploded hours earlier. Judith sat beside Richard at the parents' table, clutching a glass of rosé like it was a lifeline. Her smile was brittle, her posture too upright, her gaze sweeping the room like a general trying to assess the aftermath of a lost battle. But I didn't need to confront her directly. Her silence said it all. The damage was done, not in chaos, but in control she no longer had. Across the room, Jared kept glancing over at me. There was hesitation in his movements now, a subtle anxiety he hadn't shown before. The man who had once gone along with pushing me out of my daughter's wedding now looked like someone aware he had just dodged a disaster. During the father-daughter dance, Rachel leaned in and whispered, "Jared knows. He's embarrassed. Mom. And honestly, I think he's scared of you now." I smiled faintly. He should be. Not because I'm dangerous, but because I know my worth. And I don't let people forget it. After the dance, Richard approached me. He was looser now. A man whose plans had been publicly adjusted by someone he considered irrelevant. "Joanna," he began, using my name like it was something sour on his tongue. "I want to apologize." I cut him off. "Stop. You don't apologize to save face. You apologize when you understand what you've done, and I don't think you do. Not yet." He tried to smile, but it faltered. "Your influence today was impressive." "It wasn't influence," I replied evenly. "It was equity. 20 years of building relationships, not handshakes at galas or names on donor walls. Real work, real people, real trust." Then I leaned in slightly, just enough for only him to hear. "Do you know what your HVAC guy told me last year? That your office staff complains more about thermostat settings than they do about court deadlines. That they'd rather sweat than admit they need something fixed." I paused, letting the words sink in. "That's you, Richard, a building full of smart people too proud to admit when they've made a mistake." He opened his mouth again, but there was nothing behind his eyes but recognition. Finally, a crack in the marble, but the fracture was his to repair, not mine. The next day, I was back in my garage, reorganizing tools I already knew were in the right place. It's funny what power does. It doesn't inflate you. It grounds you, reminds you that all those years of sacrifice, exhaustion, and invisibility weren't wasted. Vincent dropped by with donuts and coffee, grinning like he'd just watched a courtroom drama, and I was the star witness. "I heard Crystal actually gave you a speech," he said between bites. "Did it kill her?" "A little," I replied. You could see it in her jaw. Every word cost her 10 calories and a decade of denial. We laughed, not cruelly, but with the kind of weariness that only siblings who've survived chaos together can afford. He tapped the side of his cup and said, "You know this isn't over, right? Crystal's the kind to regroup, not retreat." "Let her regroup," I said, wiping sawdust from my hands. "She can build an army. I have a network." But Crystal didn't regroup. She disappeared, for weeks after the wedding. Not a word. No emails, no calls, not even a passive-aggressive message about how the wedding photographer cropped her out of a group shot. It was almost eerie. But I knew why. People like Crystal aren't built to face consequences directly. They wait for the narrative to shift, for people to forget. But this time, the narrative had hardened and everyone remembered. Rachel came over one afternoon, unannounced, holding a framed wedding photo. It was the one of us, mid-dance, her mascara smudged, her hand clutching mine like she was 6 again and scared of the dark. "This is the one I'm putting in the living room," she said. "I don't care what Jared's mom thinks. You earned this." I looked at it for a long time before replying. "I didn't do this to be in pictures." "I know," she said. "But you deserve to be seen." That hit me harder than I expected. Maybe because deep down, I'd spent so many years just trying to be heard. Seen was a whole different thing. And there it was, the shift I'd been waiting for. Not dramatic, not public, just one sentence, said in a quiet kitchen, surrounded by memories of macaroni dinners and late-night homework tears. Meanwhile, Richard's law firm kept its end of the agreement. Contract revisions for Vincent's auto business were delivered on time. Zoning disputes handled with terrifying efficiency. For the first time in years. Vincent joked. It's like having legal mafia on speed dial. And Jared? He changed, too. He started showing up to family dinners with questions instead of assumptions. Helped me fix a busted sink without making dumb jokes about tools. And once, just once, he said, "Your daughter scares me in the best way. She's like you." I didn't answer. But the pride on my face did. The fallout wasn't nuclear, it was surgical. And maybe that's the real difference between revenge and justice. Revenge blows everything up. Justice rearranges the furniture until the guilty realize they're sitting in the wrong chairs. And sometimes, that's enough. But it came with a price distance. Not from Rachel or Jared, but from Crystal. From the past version of my life that had once defined my every choice. And that, strangely, felt like peace. One morning, about 3 weeks after the wedding, I found a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, in Judith's handwriting, was a single page. No apologies, no denials, just 3 sentences. You won. I see that now. But it's hard to accept being replaced. I folded it neatly and put it in a drawer, not out of spite, but because some wounds don't need replies. They just need to stop bleeding. That night, I stood in the backyard under the string lights Rachel and Lucas had helped me install for Christmas. I held my coffee close, breathing in the scent of jasmine and cedar. The air was calm, and for once, so was I. The storm had passed, and all that was left was clarity. But part of me still wondered, what if Judith tried something again? What if pride, once more, reared its head? Months passed, the seasons shifted, but the weight of that wedding day, the confrontation, the aftermath, the whispered realizations lingered in the quiet corners of my life. There was no parade to celebrate what I'd done. No headlines, no applause, just peace. A silence that, for once, wasn't laced with regret or tension, but something that felt dangerously close to liberation. People assume revenge is loud, but the most satisfying kind is quiet. It reshapes the room, and then leaves you alone with your truth. Rachel and I talked more often now, not just about wedding pictures or brunch plans, but real things: boundaries, expectations, emotional inheritance. She asked hard questions. I gave her harder answers. "Why didn't you fight for Mom to be better?" she asked one night. Her voice soft but aching. I didn't flinch, because you can't fight someone into being who they never wanted to be. You can only choose who you'll be in the wreckage. That silenced her for a long while. Then she whispered, "Thank you for staying anyway." And in that moment, every late-night emergency, every sacrifice date, every overlooked milestone suddenly felt seen. Finally, seen. As for Crystal, well, Judith, her retreat from our lives, wasn't so much an exile as it was a natural evolution. She showed up for Lucas's birthday 2 months later, unannounced, with a bottle of wine and a tentative smile. He let her in, made polite conversation, even thanked her for the gift. But when she asked if I would be joining them, he simply said, "I think she's earned a night off from pretending." It wasn't said with anger, just a calm acknowledgement that performance had been her choice. Authenticity had always been mine. The truth is, Judith wasn't the villain because she left. She was the villain because she only returned when the spotlight suited her. And for a long time, I blamed myself for not being enough, pretty enough, polished enough, passive enough to make her stay. But that's the trick life plays on caretakers. It convinces you that survival wasn't noble because it wasn't graceful. That unless your sacrifices come with a smile and fresh makeup, they don't count. But they do. Every tired morning, every scraped knee, every bill paid on time, those things are love in action. And that action doesn't need a witness to matter. Vincent's business was booming now, thanks to the free legal assistance that Richard's firm had so reluctantly provided. My brother loved to gloat in the most charming way. "Who needs enemies when you've got contracts this airtight?" he joked over dinner one night. But then his face turned more serious. "You know, Joe, most people never get justice. Not real justice. They either move on or settle. You didn't just win, you changed the damn rules." I shrugged. I didn't want to change the rules. I just wanted them to finally apply to me, too. It was true. For too long, the unspoken rule had been, I provide. They decide. I fund. They control. I build. They benefit. And when I finally dared to flip the script, to remind everyone that I wasn't a silent investor in my own life story, they panicked. But their panic wasn't the victory. Their realization was, seeing Rachel recognize the power of earned dignity, watching Lucas draw his own boundaries, witnessing Jared grow into someone who knew that respect wasn't inherited, it was earned. That was the real reward. One morning, I found a message in my inbox from someone I hadn't heard from since the wedding. Rosa, the caterer. "Joanna," she wrote, "just wanted to thank you again, not just for the business, but for standing up for people like us. You reminded me that we're not invisible, that our work matters. Hope you're doing well." I sat there staring at the screen, blinking. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was real. And in a world that often forgets the hands that hold it up, real matters more than grand. Life didn't become a fairy tale after that. I still worked long hours, still battled exhaustion and the creeping shadow of self-doubt on quiet nights. But something fundamental had shifted. I no longer questioned whether my value depended on someone else's invitation. I no longer accepted that love required silence or sacrifice without reciprocity. I wasn't just someone's ex-wife or someone's mother. I was a woman who had rebuilt her worth from blueprints no one else saw. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the backyard glowed with the soft amber of dusk, Rachel joined me outside. No makeup, no wedding stress, just her in a blanket. "Do you think I was wrong to forgive Mom?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, not as avoidance, but as respect. "No," I finally said. "Forgiveness isn't weakness, but forgetting is. Just know the difference." She nodded, and we sat there. Two women from two generations, united not by biology or even tradition, but by the choice to stay, to repair, to protect, to reclaim. "You know," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I used to think you were just tough. But now I realize you're free." I smiled, not because she was right, but because she was learning. And maybe that was the real endgame all along. Not revenge, not even justice, but freedom. The kind that doesn't need acknowledgement. The kind that doesn't require permission. The kind that lets you stand in your own backyard, watching the people who once underestimated you now look to you for strength. Because once you've walked through fire and refused to burn, the smoke doesn't scare you anymore. You can't control who hurts you, but you can decide what you'll do with the ashes. Some people build walls, others build stories. I built boundaries, and a damn good life.